welcome everyone to our first Saturday South Speaker Series. I'm really excited. I'm hoping this will allow more people around the globe to participate in our future South Talks. And I'm super excited to have our guest today, Sarah Treadwell. She has a very special interest in astrobiology, which excites me to no end. I can't wait to hear what you have to say today. She's got a master's in science comms from the University of Wisconsin Whitewater, working on your PhD at the University of North Dakota in communications. And you're a research science affiliate with the Blue Marble Space Institute of Science, and a lot more. But we'll leave it at that and let you fill in the blanks. So, welcome to the South Speaker Series.
Well, thank you. And it's very nice meeting you all from all different corners of the United States and the world.
Mhm.
Um, I am going to be giving you a presentation, not just on astrobiology, but I was explaining to Barb that I've learned that if I don't give you a little bit of context of my story and my life, I get to the end of these presentations and everyone just is sort of like, wait, how did you get involved in this? So I've started making my presentations a little bit of a biography of my life and how I got to where I am today, and also throwing in lots of cool adventures in science in the mix of it. So with that, I will share my screen. I have one video, which I don't know why Canva, when you play a video, you have to like exit the whole presentation to bring the presentation back up. So there'll be one point where you'll see the nonsense that is my desktop. Um, but let me get to sharing this. And let me know if you can see everything. Can everyone see my screen? Which is the most cliche thing to say ever now on.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely.
Okay. So yeah, hi, I'm Sarah. I go by the professional name Space Case Sarah, and I am a science communicator who is affiliated with way too many things and have been on so many different adventures and different organizations that have funded those. So this is just a quick snapshot of some of the affiliations that I am a part of. But my interest is in astrobiology, and if you're not familiar with it, which I think a lot of people are, but if you're not familiar with it, this is the proper definition, which it is the study of the origin, evolution, and distribution of life in the universe. I like to tell people that it's also, in practice, it's the going to very extreme places on Earth to understand the limits of life here so we can better understand how to look for life in our solar system. It seems to be an easy way to get people to understand like why I get to go to so many unique places. Since you're all Star Trek fans, you might be familiar with this, but one of the things that I get a lot is people are like, oh, do you think aliens exist? Do you think that there's life elsewhere? And so if you're not familiar with the Drake equation, Drake came up with this equation that basically took in all of these factors of different stars and potential planetary systems around those stars. And he did a formula that came up with what is the statistical odds or the probability that there is advanced life, like intelligent life. And when you plug in these numbers, it's actually kind of scary no matter which way you look at it. Either it's an overwhelming amount of life or there's nothing. And so when people ask me if I think there is life elsewhere out there, I unequivocally say yes. I just, when if some of you are astronomers and when you see those pictures from the James Webb Telescope and you know that every single one of those points of light are galaxies, they're not stars, like it seems statistically impossible that we are alone. But unfortunately, NASA cannot, send things much further than the furthest edge of our solar system. And we can't, do good science saying we're going to go look for little green men on Mars. So what we do in reality is we look for life as we know it on Earth and search for signs of it in the past or the present, based on life as we understand it, which is, basically the most cliche thing again is follow the water. So, that's a big thing that NASA has always stood by for many years, although that is changing, is to follow the water, follow for signs where water might have been. So the Perseverance rover is a great example of astrobiology research and practice today. It is core drilling specifically in areas that is looking for something called stromatolites, which is something that we know when there was water on Mars, stromatolites existed I'm sorry, stromatolites existed on Earth about the same time we think water existed on Mars. So we're looking for life as we know it. And this is the Jezero crater where Perseverance landed, and you can like it's so obvious that water was there, right? You can see the flow. So she landed in an area that, based on what we understand on Earth, a stromatolite could have grown in that area. It's just like a bacteria that kind of layers up. So as fun as it is to think about, are we alone and are there aliens, and kind of go Carl Sagan contact, um, real astrobiology is about looking at the small stuff. So I'm going to give you a little background of my story and why this science is so important to me and how I got where I am today. And I also give the disclaimer that I don't mean to insult or offend anyone who might have some faith structures or faith systems. This is just my story and how I have navigated the world based on what I was raised in. So I was born and raised in Wisconsin to a very musical family, a very, very musical family. My mom was a band teacher, and I started playing piano when I was 3. And I was raised and educated in a very, very small Christian conservative church. And I was educated in that. And we were young Earth creationists. So the Earth is 6,000 years old. I was told that dinosaurs probably were real, but that fossils were placed in the Earth to trick our faith. And, the flood did everything. And K through 12, that's what I was raised in. And when I graduated from high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And my high school counselor said to me, Sarah, if you don't figure out what you want to do after high school, you're never going to make anything of yourself. And those words really stuck with me. So I ended up going to school for music, for opera singing, actually. I was amazingly cool, as you can see by these pictures. And I was doing that for a few years. And then I realized, I don't know if this is what I want to do. I just kind of went into music because it was all I knew. But I didn't really want to go to Italy and pay to play, essentially. That's the way it works in opera singing. So I dropped out of that major. And I have what I call my first life crisis. So I dropped out and I didn't know what I was doing. And I ended up just kind of working in the college town that I lived in. And I met my now ex-husband. He got a job in upstate New York. So I went and moved to upstate New York and worked at the National Museum of Horse Racing. I got a degree. I finished my degree in English and started working in fundraising and development. And that was really fun for some time. I lived up near Saratoga Springs, and I really thought that was what I was going to do. I really enjoyed fundraising and nonprofit work, but I got pregnant. And so we moved back to the Midwest when I was pregnant with my daughter. And then I very quickly got pregnant again with my son. And so I became the stay-at-home primary parent. My kids are much older than these pictures now, but that was kind of, what I also thought I was going to do. I was just going to be the stay-at-home parent. And I got married very, very young, just a disclaimer, by the way. And I didn't really know anything. I had gotten kicked out of the church that I was raised in, by the way, because I just wasn't very well at conforming to what they wanted. And so I pretty much just kept everything at arm's length. If it was religion, if it was politics, if it was science, I didn't care. I just everything could just stay as far away as possible. When I had my daughter, that's when I realized, okay, I maybe should start thinking about what it is I think about the world and my own opinions. And I was up really late with her one night, and there was this random show on TV called Cosmos. And I know, I'm so sorry, it is the Neil deGrasse Tyson version, but I had never heard of so many of these scientific concepts. And so what really blew my mind was, if you're familiar with the show and even Carl Sagan's version, there's that cosmic calendar from that point of the Big Bang to when humans show up on the calendar. And, it's 12 months, and humans show up on December 31st at 12:35 or something like that. And you're like, wow, that's amazing. And I realized, like, I did not know anything. I just became enraptured with science and just trying to learn as much as I could. So that's what I did. I got my first telescope, started really getting into astronomy. I started just reading and watching anything I could possibly get my hands on about science. Really got into Carl Sagan and the Voyager records and learning about those missions. I learned about astrobiology at this time. I also started working in fundraising and development at a local natural history museum, which was always really funny for me because those were some of the first experiences I had where just the words like millions and billions were just tossed about as if they were scientifically real. And I was like, oh, this is so scandalous, like just from what I was raised in. And anyway, I honestly had at this time this mindset of in another life, I wish I would have gotten my degree in science. In another life, I wish I would have done this. And this is when we enter the second life crisis. And I was coming home from an astronomy event and I got into a very big car accident. And that was very scary. And the only thing I was thinking about at that time was how angry my ex-husband was going to be that I totaled our car. So there were a lot of things that kind of snapped in that moment where I was like, that's probably not what someone should be thinking. And I also realized I only have this one life and I want to pursue the things that interest me and I'm very passionate about. And I'm really passionate about this thing called astrobiology. And I'm going to try to get into that no matter what it takes, even though I was an English major. So I started asking around different people, how do I do this? How do I get into astrobiology? And somebody told me, well, why don't you go to your local community college and just start taking every science class you can ever possibly take? So that's what I started doing. I'm still actually really great friends with so many people at that school. I took everything you could possibly think of. And I also started being an affiliate with a lab at Northern Illinois University. There was a lab that had some grants from NASA that was doing astrobiology work. And so I really was gearing up to somehow figure out how to go back to school for my master's in biology. And I wanted to go to NIU. Wasn't quite sure how I was going to pull that off, but I was very determined. And then, and we can all relate to this one, the third in our collective life crisis, the pandemic hit. And I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? I didn't want to lose this momentum. I was also in the process of starting my divorce and I just, I kind of panicked. And someone had suggested to me that there was an organization called Blue Marble Space Institute of Science that they have partnered with NASA astrobiology to do internships and that maybe there was something there that I could do to kind of bide my time during that mythical 8 weeks that we were just, going to be waiting around, right? And so I found a topic for an internship called Communicating Earth and Space Science Topics. And that was another kind of aha moment where I thought, I never really thought about that. In my mind, communicators were Bill Nye or, Neil deGrasse Tyson. But that kind of made me aware that there are so many avenues that you can work in science communication. And it lined up very nicely with my passion and my degree. And so I kind of shift gears at that moment and, oops, hold on, I'm getting ahead of myself, and decided to start pursuing a degree in communications instead. And so getting that internship also just somewhat emboldened me because I really felt like I didn't belong there. Imposter syndrome was big at that time. And it really just made me kind of feel like, what, if I can just go for that, I can go for anything. And so in my personal life, I started getting into really big adventures. I took up scuba diving. I trekked to Everest Base Camp. I also applied to be a communications officer for a Mars simulation, which was very fun. That was in the high desert of Utah. And I just really got this confidence that I could do anything. And so I also applied then to be a communicator for hold on. I had a radio show for a while at a time. I didn't remember I had this slide in there. But anyway, I started just getting involved in everything. I just had this confidence that just soared. Went back to school for my master's degree. Okay, this is the point where I thought I was in my presentation. So I saw a call for communicators for a research ship called the Joides Resolution. And it was expeditions that you would sail for 2 months. And I don't know. I was like, why not? And so I applied for that. And there was a expedition that was very related to astrobiology that I'm going to be honest with you. there was one expedition that was going to Greece, and like, who wouldn't want to go to Greece? That was actually the first one I applied to, but they knew my interest in astrobiology, so they were like, please come back and interview for this one. So I got selected to be a communications officer on this research vessel, the Joides Resolution, which was funded by the NSF. It unfortunately just got retired recently, but at the time when I sailed, it was funded by the NSF and operated by the International Ocean Discovery Program. And we were going to the Lost City hydrothermal field. Let me see what's coming up next. Yeah, so this is our patch from the expedition. I find it hilarious to look at now, and I'll explain why. But we were going to the Atlantis Massif, which is right in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and we were going to what is called the Lost City. And we were going to attempt to drill the deepest hole that has ever been drilled, this U1309D. That was our primary goal. And I'll tell you why it's funny later. But this to me is the like epitome of don't get your ex's name tattooed on you or something like that, because that hole became absolutely useless to us later, but it's on our patch forever. So I have a video that actually explains the mission better than I'm gonna, give myself a break from blabbing here. But all the video in this I shot for Al Jazeera. We did something very, very significant on our expedition, and all these news crews started reaching out and wanted us to help them create stories. And so this was the one that other than drone video, I completely shot this whole thing. So I am going to play this for you. And like I said, I'll have to back out briefly and then go back into the presentation. But this is essentially a really great synopsis of our expedition.
Welcome aboard the Resolution. It's a 45-year-old oil drilling ship, but it's sailed most of its life as a science vessel. Its crew navigated to soft spots on the Earth's crust where rocks that should be hidden deep out of reach are pushed up by the movement of the planet's surface. In the middle of the Atlantic Ocean lies a mountain the size of Mont Blanc. There's no place closer to the Earth's mantle, the mysterious layer below the crust. It's called the Atlantic Massif, the Lost City. The scientists on board are studying these places where life may have begun.
But here, what's happened is we've had this faulting close to the mid-ocean ridge, which is kind of pulled like this. If you imagine my fingers of the mantle, they'll be down there, but they get pulled out like this until they're on the surface. And we see the mantle and the lower crust. The only way we can get to these by direct drilling is where there's a fault, because these rocks do not form on the seafloor.
They find a borehole that was drilled years ago. Using tools that can operate at high temperatures without electronics, they drill and scoop up samples along the way. They pull out the core, lift it to the surface in long plastic tubes, and remove the chunks one by one. Then the science begins. They want to capture every detail from the millions of years of history that are embedded in each piece. So it's sliced, loaded onto conveyor belts, and photographed.
So with a crucial split, we can see the inside of the rock, and we look for a couple of major things. The first is what rock types we see. So we look for variations in the minerals that we see, variations in the rock type.
Because it's here in the alchemy of the early ocean where chemistry may have transformed into biology. When the greenish mineral olivine contacts seawater, it burns in a chemical reaction, creating new minerals and releasing gases through a process called serpentinization. Those gases, like hydrogen and methane, may have been fuel for the earliest forms of life. And understanding these reactions will give clues to so-called exobiologists who are looking for similar conditions under the icy oceans of the moons of Jupiter and Saturn.
There's people who are looking at this question of where that boundary is by looking at how life lives right now and trying to figure out what's common across all living domains. And so what those earliest forms of life might have looked like.
The Resolution is likely retiring. Its annual U.S. government fund of $50 million is coming to an end. The samples it digs up will be stored in vaults for study in the years ahead. Colin Baker, Al Jazeera.
All right, hold on. So let me get back to this. Susan, who was one of the scientists that talked on this, gave me all of her underwater video of the lost city from a previous expedition that she sailed on. So you can see all the heat coming off of those spires. What is so fascinating about this location that they call the Lost City is, first of all, this is the only vent field we know that works this way. We have not found another one on planet Earth like this. It's very special. It's a little bit of a misnomer to call it a hydrothermal vent because it doesn't work the same way. As he mentioned in the video, it is fueled essentially by a chemical reaction of those mantle rocks being so close to the surface, and they're creating this exothermic reaction that is this building up of this crusty stuff that's called serpentinite. And it's a lot lower in temperature than other hydrothermal fields around the Earth. So bacteria grows super great all over this. Micro life loves it here. There's actually not a lot of macro life. It's mostly microbial life. And the hydrocarbons, the methane, the hydrogen that's being produced there, those are what we call the building blocks of life. So for many astrobiologists, this is a beautiful, it's a great sort of place to look at to try to understand. Maybe it's one of the two leading theories of how life maybe got started on Earth for astrobiology. This was the reason that I was selected to go, because of that astrobiology research focus. And one of the other things that we did in this expedition, we not only core drilled up samples, we also sent down a special tool that collected water samples going down throughout this core, the borehole. And it was designed with, oh my gosh, I can remember the name, but different springs that would open at different points. And it was collecting samples continuously going down, which is pretty uncommon. It was the first time this has ever been done. And what we were looking for is just essentially, what are the thermal limits of life? Like, how hot is too hot going down that hole to find living organisms? Because we know what that looks like in a lab, but we don't really know what that looks like in the wild. And so that can help us give some clues to, when we look at those icy moons of Europa and Enceladus, how cold is too cold, how hot is too hot, how much radiation is too much radiation. The other really significant thing that happened, though, and that's a picture of me by the ship, so that gives you a sense of the size of that vessel. The ship had previously gone to this location to try to pull up mantle rocks, and had pulled up 97 meters of mantle rock at about a 30% recovery rate. So of that 97 meters, only 30% of the rocks came up. We, in the end, pulled up 1,268 meters of mantle rock with an almost 100% recovery rate. So that is a bunch of scientists pointing when we hit the 1,000-meter mark. Nobody could believe this is happening. This was a different hole than the one we were originally going to go to. So it's really funny to me now, like I said, on our patch, that hole that we had first gone to, we actually got stuck in it when we had to just abandon it and move on to somewhere else. And so it's really funny that the really significant, literally career changing for everyone hole that we had such success in is not even on the patch. So yeah, we ended up going up to 1,267 meters, 68, I think, if you round up. And this was just huge. I mean, when word started getting out, the media just was constantly just, oh my gosh, we want to talk to you. There was a bit of a misunderstanding of the efforts to reach the MOHO, because this isn't really the MOHO line proper. This is mantle rock artificially, not artificially, it's, being pushed up. But this is the most mantle rock ever recovered from planet Earth. It was a really big deal. And we got published in Science this last August for that. That was our first major publication. And a little kind of, I don't know, petty note, but as you see the names that are listed, there's 30 some of us, or 19 plus authors. And, it's ... And then you have, and Sarah Treadwell, because my name is dead last, but it's right there on the preview. So that's funny to me. But this is huge for missions like the Clipper mission that is going to be reaching Europa in 5 years from now. We know that Europa is erupting water and ejecta, they call it, from the planet due to Jupiter's pull on it. It, is erupting water and rocky material. And so one of the missions for Clipper is to fly actually only 16 miles above it. I'm sorry for my UK friends. I don't know what that is in meters at the top of my head, but it has a little tool that's going to try to catch some of those water and those rock samples as it flies over Europa. And then we can compare what it finds to this mantle rock recovery and our fluid samplings from my expedition. So for astrobiology research, this is really significant because that's the deepest we've ever really got down into our own planet. And so that helps us understand what we might find on icy moons of our solar system. And NASA was very careful when it launched it to say it's not looking for life, it's looking for the conditions that might be ideal for life so that we can then build another spacecraft to go out and do further investigations. So that is its primary purpose. Oops. So anyway, that was a huge break for me to get, published in Science. That was my first major publication, and it's in one of the biggest journals you could ever hope and dream to be published in. So that was a really big lucky break for me. And then I got home from this expedition and I was sitting in a meeting with NASA Astrobiology, and this group comes in and their name is OpenSpace. And OpenSpace was giving us a demonstration of their software that basically is a data visualization of everything in the known universe. And they had a script for astrobiology that we could use as communicators to talk about science. And before I even could ask, they said, but the only thing we don't have developed yet is going under the water to like hydrothermal vents. And I was like, oh, that stinks, because that's what I, just came from. And that would be really useful for me for my outreach work. And then someone from what is called the NASA Scope grant group was there, and she's in my chat and she's saying, hey, you could write a grant to work with OpenSpace to get that put into their program for your work. And I had never even heard of any of this. And I was like, oh, okay. So I wrote a grant for a seed grant with them, and I won the grant. I got fully funded. And so the year of 2023 into 2024 was primarily focused on doing just that. So I was working very closely with the American Museum of Natural History, that's where OpenSpace is based out of, to develop this storyline and the visualizations of connecting why the Lost City is so important for a place like Europa and the Clipper mission. And what happened, though, is I accidentally became a planetarium show director because I, wrote this whole grant not knowing what I was getting myself into and not knowing anything about planetariums. And I realized very quickly that I was in way over my head, and that I needed to figure out how to learn how to fly, is what we call it, through OpenSpace. Because if you don't know what you're doing, especially in planetarium shows, I always joke, but with great power comes great responsibility. And if you fly poorly, you can make people nauseous. It's an art. So I started borrowing a dome system from a local group nearby. And in an effort to learn how to write my own planetarium show, I started taking the dome out to local schools in my area, and it kind of took off like wildfire. I started giving planetarium shows, just very simple. I call it the field trip of the solar system, and I cannot begin to describe how overwhelmingly in demand this became for me. I did a quick little video to just show you what a dome day looks like and what kids sound like inside it. It has been so immensely impactful for me and my community. Sorry, I forgot about this video. So if you've ever been in a planetarium, obviously. If you've ever had that experience, it is extremely overwhelming and immersive and just awe-inspiring. And my community is, it is a kind of a tough town to live in. It's very similar to like Detroit, Michigan in terms of crime, and most of our schools, actually all of them now, I think now, unfortunately, all of our elementary schools are what they call Title I, which means they have met the standards of income levels, low test scores, socioeconomic kind of disadvantages to get more federal funding. So for most of these kids, they have not actually ever even gone to a movie theater. They never get these experiences. So for me to be able to bring it to these schools has been absolutely life-changing for me and for these kids. And it became so much bigger than just connecting ocean and space research. It really became something that I kind of feel like is my calling now. And I went to, in like the course of 3 months, I went to 12 elementary schools and reached almost 2,000 kids. That's how just unbelievably overwhelming the response was for, oh no, I have it up there, 1,782. I was keeping very good count for NASA. So I started even writing down some of these quotes of what I would hear kids say in the dome, because it just, you know, that you're potentially changing a child's life to become a lifelong learner and want to learn about space and space science. And so I also would take telescopes for them to look at and check out and stuff. And so it's just been, it just, for me, it was something that I just stumbled into, and now it's just become such a huge part of what I do. And so significant. Well, what fun highlight for me is I actually got to debut my planetarium show at Hayden Planetarium. So that was a really amazing experience to get to go to the best planetarium in the world and premiere my show. I'm sorry, I'm kind of all over the place because I wrote this a while back, but yes. So so my life has pretty much become dedicated now to planetarium shows and connecting ocean and space research and talking about the Lost City. I've been working on a book project. That's what I'm showing here with Blue Marble. I'm still affiliated with them to help kind of keep spreading this awareness of this unique and one-of-a-kind location on planet Earth, and also tell the story of the researchers who accidentally discovered it, because how often does someone discover something for the first time? I think that's just a fantastic story. Then this is where my brain is a little scrambled, because I was telling Barb, I actually just got back from Patagonia yesterday, more like in around 10 a.m. I just got back, and I got some really exciting news while I was there. So you are the first group that gets to hear this. So the reason I was in Patagonia is I have been doing work with the American Union of, I don't remember what AOI stands for, I'm sorry, but they have a program called the Astronomy in Chile Educator Ambassadors Program. So last July, I went out to Chile to get to go to see the amazing dark skies. This is just from my cell phone, by the way. I just like propped it on something and I just like let it just sit open for a little bit. Get to go see all the observatories in Chile, learn about all the science that they're doing there. I got to see the Vera Rubin telescope. That was really cool. See Gemini. I got to go up to Alma and go up all the way up to the high site with the radio telescopes, which was really neat. And they also have oh, there's me at the high site. I tried to do like a contact pose while I was up there, by the way, and it was just really cold. It didn't come out perfect, but they also have a program that takes you down now the other way to Patagonia. And so that's actually where I just was the last 2 weeks. I was down there learning about more environmental conservation and ocean research, which is a little bit outside of the space realm, but it's still affiliated with that organization. And it was gorgeous. It was unbelievably gorgeous. So no regrets on going on that expedition, even though it doesn't super tie into Space Case Sarah. But while I was down there, about 2 months ago, was asked by the NASA Scope Grant Program. Well, I was asked originally to reapply for a NASA Scope grant, but then the Scope program announced that they were going to be doing what they called a jumbo grant for educational outreach. And so I applied for that and found out last Wednesday that I got the only complete full funding for a much, much, much bigger scope grant to continue to do my planetarium show work and do outreach for ocean space, and really continue to expand on that storyline in conjunction with the JPL lab with their Ocean Worlds lab. So I will be collaborating with JPL to continue to do outreach for this storyline of connecting why the Lost City is so important for the Clipper mission. And then JPL is going to actually be able to do some input and request more things being added into open space. And we're going to do a really big program, and we call it the Ocean Worlds Roadshow. So I just found out that I got that funding for the rest of the whole year, and it's the biggest grant I've ever won. So I'm very, very excited about that. Anyway, so looking ahead, I, as Barb mentioned, am working on a PhD at the University of North Dakota, and I am in the thick of it right now, and that is stressful, but I will get through it. And at my university, I am a communicator on a project that does research up in the Arctic. It's called the Arctek Lab. They keep changing the name. So it's the Arctek Lab, and it's in partnership with the Cold Regions Research and Engineering Laboratory, CREL. And they are basically mapping permafrost in the area to understand how that's affecting the infrastructure in the area. So that's what I do for my work at the University of North Dakota. I am also a teacher. I teach social media courses as well as science communication classes. And I, like I mentioned, have 2 kids. So these are my kids today. And I am still a very proud mom, and they're very, very proud of their mom and all the adventures she gets to go on. So that is amazing to me. And I haven't even gotten a chance yet to celebrate with them about this new grant that I got. So I'm really excited to get to celebrate with them soon. And then kind of looping it back to the beginning of the story, I never stopped thinking about that high school advisor who told me that I would never make anything of myself. And I have definitely felt that I have proven him wrong. So if you have a phone and you want to scan a QR code, this is me on social media if you would like to follow me. And then I'm going to stop sharing and would love to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you very, very much. I'm going to remove the spotlight so we can see everybody. And get my
I'm going to read the chat now because I saw it blowing up and I couldn't I couldn't read it because I was sharing the screen.
Yeah, I think there's a few questions in the chat.
Yeah, NIU is your alma mater. That's awesome. Were the rock cores mostly metamorphic? Yes, they were. So the cores were interesting because the way that the mantle kind of works in that area is that it comes up and it goes back down, it comes up and it goes back down. And so when it comes to the categorization of what they were very very varied. Not a lot of Gabbro, because the Gabbro people were very upset about that. They were also heavily serpentinized. So kind of one of the things I can't talk a lot about publicly, but it's not a big deal now. It's in the papers. One of the byproducts of serpentinization is asbestos. And so there was a heavy amount of asbestos in some of the cores, which freaked some people out. But then the scientists were like, this is the type of asbestos that you'd have to like directly snort it for it to be dangerous. And, we cut the cores underwater. So it was a bit of a drama on the ship. Yeah, it was kind of a big deal for a while. But yeah, the thing that's funny to me too about when they would do the observations on the cores and you have all these rock professionals that they'd just be, oh, look at that. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, I see a gray rock and like another gray rock. Can you explain to me, like I'm in kindergarten, why is this part so cool to you? Because I don't have that trained eye to know exactly what they're looking at and what they're seeing. It's going to take a really, really long time for them to process all that core too. So, I mean, we kind of got to the point where it was so desperate. We were pulling it up so fast that they were just like, cut it in half, put it in storage. We'll deal with it later because we just did not have the time to have them analyze all of it. I just want to catch up on the chat really quick here. You saw serpentinite rock in Pennsylvania. It's so pretty, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The difference between serpentinite and serpentinite rock. So serpentinite rock is that beautiful green bluish color. What the Lost City is made up of is sort of like a calcite. It's that byproduct. So that's the serpentinite that is building up that's making the Lost City. So it's very brittle. It's actually very fragile. And then when it gets expended, you can actually, I could bring up the video for you again, but you can see the difference between one that hasn't been depleted and one that's still active. Like it turns into a different color and it gets a little bit harder in color. But that's my most knowledge about the differences between the two. Patagonia, yes, Patagonia was amazing. So remote. I honestly had a couple of times where I was waking up in the middle of the night and it was so dark. I almost felt panicked because they turned off all the power at night because there's no power other than solar. So to conserve the solar power, they would turn all the power off at night. So it's just pitch black. And I'd wake up and I felt like I was like in a cave because there was just no light. It was a really amazing, very remote experience. Okay. I think I have caught up.
I think that was absolutely fascinating, and I wondered, are you able to share a PDF of your paper in science?
I can.
Okay.
Yes. I'll have to look for it in the massive
You
amounts
could
of.
email it to me later,
Yeah.
and then I can see if anyone wants a copy.
Yeah, definitely.
That would be great.
Yes. It's very nerdy. It's very rock nerdy.
So they're analyzing, are they, right now, are their projects analyzing the samples?
Yeah. So when you pull up samples, where it is pulled up from the ocean floor determines where it gets sent to. There are 4 repositories around the world. Our location meant that our core samples went to Germany, Bremen, Germany. So they can request to have core samples sent from that repository to whatever university that they happen to be at. And the cores get placed under a moratorium for 2 years after your expedition. And then when that 2 years is up, then it's available to anyone who wants to research the cores. So we're getting close to that point. So they're working right now very much on the core describing still, like they're still catching up with the core describing. And then from that, then people will choose that, well, that sounds really interesting for what I'm interested in researching. And then the fluid sampling and the biology aspects of it, those take a lot longer to process. So it's going to be a while for the results for those to come out, but they definitely feel that it's going to be just as significant and probably get a big publication either in like Nature or Science from there as well. And Eric asked, so Lost City, Mid-Atlantic Ridge. Yes, it's literally smack dab in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, pretty much straight east from New York City. It's kind of funny. I actually can even like on my flight, you can see the crack on the globe on the map on the plane, and I can see there's like a little zigzag Z part, and I know exactly where the Lost City is on that zigzag. And Debbie asked, will Doge affect anything that you are doing? Doge gave me pretty much a heart attack through this grant writing process. I'm not going to lie. So far, no, I don't think that it has affected myself or JPL and their part in their grant for our collaboration so far. So that's pretty much the most diplomatic answer I can give to that. But the we're freezing all federal grants moment was a little bit scary for a bit for me.
Anyone else have any questions? I can see Jacques preparing.
All right. Yeah. Totally uninteresting, I guess, for the rest, but I noticed in one of those badges, there was a lot of names around it, and one of them was Levesque. Do you know that Levesque person?
Levesque, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And where's that person from?
He lives in the United States. He was our
Okay.
commander for our
Okay.
expedition. Mark Levesque is his name.
Yeah,
He's from the US, but I
because
don't remember.
that's a very French name, you
It's a
know.
very French name,
Our
yes.
best the best prime minister we ever had in Quebec was René Lévesque. So I
Oh,
was wondering. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
All
I
right,
don't
sorry.
know where he's originally or his family
Yeah,
is from, but he lives
yeah.
in New England somewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, you know, there's Levex in France as well, but a
sure.
lot of French Canadians moved to New England during you know, the cotton years, the cotton. Anyways, all
Yeah.
right.
No, yeah, no worries. He was very funny too. He was definitely a Martian nerd. And one of the things we were required to do was to watch The Martian one night and eat potatoes. And that was all we had for dinner. That's what he made.
A lot of swearing that night. Okay.
Yeah.
They weren't homegrown potatoes, were they? Just checking.
Yeah,
Because
I
I
don't
remember
know.
what they were grown in.
No, I don't know if they were grown in. And I actually,
Well,
so one of our scientists at Blue Marble Space, he is the head of the lab that tests the plants that get sent up to the ISS. And I've had a conversation with him, and he's like, "Man, the amount of times people ask me about growing potatoes on Mars," and he's like, "I will just get it out of the way. Yes, you could, but you would die if your diet was completely sustaining off of that because the potatoes can, I don't remember what it is in the regolith in on Martian soil, but like there's something in it that the potatoes absorb and they can't expel it. And then we also can't expel it. And if it builds up in your system, you'll start getting like cancer and like really bad side effects. So what they're doing is actually trying to develop enzymes that can eat that whatever it is in the regolith to then grow plants on Mars. So their work is super fascinating.
I guess they could call them Mars fries, right? You can fries out of
Well,
Mars.
what would happen if Elon gets there first? What do we call them? Doge fries. Yeah.
oh,
Oh.
hmm.
So as I understand it, if I'm remembering right, you were talking about stromatolites and
Mhm.
um, are when they're are you looking for evidence of
Mhm.
them or a byproduct of them?
Evidence because in like Australia, we see fossilized stromatolites.
Mhm.
So they're looking for something similar of that on Earth, just because we have evidence of it here based on having water in those spots. So that's why the Jezero crater was such a very important selection because they basically looked at the the conditions in Australia and what that looked like and then said, okay, what can we find that looks closest to that on Mars to send Perseverance to. So that's again where I'm always like, I wish we could be like, let's go find all the big advanced aliens, but it's based in such, this is what we know.
Right,
And we're going to
right.
use that as our guidance to go out there and look further.
Yeah, because that they're believed to be the first, like the origin of all life on Earth.
Yeah, and so this is hotly debated in astrobiology, and obviously I'm biased now, but it's either did life get started in shallow pools kind of up close to the surface, or did life get started down deep in the ocean at a place like the Lost City? And there's people who they spar on this of which one they think is more probable. I'm biased again because I'm very attached to the Lost City now, and I'm like, it's got to be like a Lost City vent field. But it's fun. It's fun not to know. Have I heard of the messenger theory? Are you talking about like panspermia?
No, this is actually, it sort of wanders off into science fiction here a bit.
Okay.
Um, the messenger theory was something proposed in the Andromeda strain
Okay.
by Michael Crichton.
Oh, yes, very sci-fi.
Um, they had a movie of the same, they had a book and then they had a movie, oddly enough, and then they redid it as a mini series. They didn't touch on the messenger theory in the mini series. So the premise of the Andromeda strain is this: the NASA and the U.S. was sending up satellites to collect stuff, just debris from orbit, and then bring it back and then find out if it's biologically active.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it wipes out the whole town because, of course, it does.
Right.
It comes down a place where it's not supposed to for
Sure.
whatever reason, and the town people wander out and find, oh, look, there's this thing.
Yeah.
Instead of they bring it in. So the messenger theory says, instead of using physics to send out a message saying, "Hi, here we are,"
Right.
they used biology.
Mm.
So it would be the problem with sending a signal, of course, first off, if you're not looking,
Right.
yeah, and then the inverse square law, because
Mm-hmm.
you'd have to send out such a strong signal from the source in order to get anything out there at a distance, whereas biology is as strong on the receiving end as it is on the sending end.
Mm-hmm.
So you sort of set out an organism that creates its own communication system when it gets there.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I have not heard of that specifically. But it does make me think a little bit about, one of the initiatives NASA is really actually taking seriously now is, okay, so we're looking for maybe signs of life in the atmosphere, the cloud decks of Venus. We're looking at Mars. We're looking at Europa and Enceladus. How do we address the public if we do find something, and some of the philosophical challenges to that do, like, it's sort of one of those things that I don't know anyone really wants to deal with it until it actually happens. But how did that get there then? Was it back in early ancient, early Earth history, when things are smashing into each other and things are ejecting out and they're passing things back and forth? Like, is that like just something that came from here? Or it's gonna be a wild west for a while if we do find something, and philosophy will just explode. And I'm kind of looking forward to the day when I first started getting into astrobiology. I really felt very strongly that at some point, just like there are subsets within biology, like microbiology, I think astrobiology will become a subset of, academia at universities. Right now, there's only, I think, 2 places that offer astrobiology as a degree. Otherwise, it's just something you do. Like, you become a scientist in something and you become an astrobiologist. So, yeah, it kind of reminds me a little bit of that, though. How, I don't know. How did we get here? Are we alone? It's the big questions, right?
Interesting. Anyone else have questions?
I'm a mum with 2 small people as well.
Okay.
So I want to know, how do you manage to fit all the science around the 2 small people?
Oh, I know. I get asked that a lot. And I do. That's why I do bring it up in my talks, because I want to just encourage other women to remember that, you don't, your life doesn't end when you become a mom. You're still a person. You're a full, complete human being that with hopes and dreams. And I am very fortunate that I've had a really great school that provides great aftercare when it's the school year. I've had people be able to support me and watch them. Their dad is still in the picture, so he'll watch the kids as well. I honestly would say, though, if it weren't for things like FaceTime and Zoom, it would be really, really difficult for me. That's what's making it possible on my end to be able to FaceTime them. I actually FaceTime my kids on the ferry going back and forth to Patagonia. Being able to check in with them is what keeps me able to feel confident doing it. In terms of how do I balance my time, this semester has been so tough. We are using plastic silverware and paper plates because I'm so desperate right now that I'm just like, sorry, kids, like this is what we're doing right now. So it's not easy by any means, but my kids are so proud. Usually I get a patch from each expedition. They have all of my patches on their backpacks, and yeah, so it kind of makes it worth it for me in the end.
This reminds me, I wanted to say to all the women here, to all the ladies here, have a good Women's Right Day.
Thank you.
Because that is still a thing, regardless of what the oligarchs at Apple and Google did to their calendar. It's still Women's Right Day today.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
One of the things that I've been doing for that book project I'm working on is interviewing some of the original research team that discovered the lost city. And some of these women were, I call them almost first generation researchers of ocean researchers, because women weren't still allowed to go on ships until like the 1970s, which is wild. So they were some of those first waves that went out and did it. And I'm just like, they are my heroes. Just it's a, it's wild to me still that it's not that long ago that it was too, bad luck to let a woman on a ship. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
The Google Doodle for today is actually women in STEM.
Is it?
Nice.
Yay.
I experienced the same thing. I graduated in 1987. I was an older student, but in wildlife biology. And at that time, we had one female biologist in the state of Michigan. And my cohort were the first ones to follow her.
Mm-hmm.
And we experienced discrimination also. I couldn't do an internship working with the bear study because they didn't want to deal with housing a female. I got stuck studying turkeys and Sichuan pheasants, which was nothing I was interested in. I did learn how to make a turkey pen. I guess that was something, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's coming along.
Yeah. Well, that's what they said a lot to the women. They were like, man, it's gotten so much better from when, we first went out and sailed, and
Hmm.
there were no, I don't remember what they said about the toilets, but there was something about the toilets that they were like, they finally like made the toilets more women friendly and things like that. I'd have to re-listen to their interviews, but it was very inspirational to listen to them because, even like Marie Tharp, who was the one who discovered the mid-Atlantic ridge and stuff like that. She had to basically have a guy go on her behalf to go out to the ocean to verify that her maps were accurate. And yeah,
Crazy.
so crazy.
Well, if we have no more questions, one last chance. Any of the quieter ones want to ask anything? All right. Well, I
I'm
want
not
to
one of the quiet ones, but a big thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
yes, your story is very inspirational. It makes me wish I was 30 years, 40 years younger now and could go back but I'm still going to keep learning about astrobiology. It's very exciting. And
Super. I
I feel
mean,
inspired by your talk, and I'm going to be 67 this year. I'm ready to take on learning something else new. So
it's
thank you.
exciting. I'm very excited that so many NASA missions now are very much dedicated to looking for life elsewhere. It's a huge focus. And actually this year, even the NASA calendar, if you got it yet, it's this logo, this image, which I figured out almost every vessel in it, but it has Clipper and the ISS and one of the Gemini telescopes, and I know the name of the ship. And then sorry, my notifications are blocking it, but that's what it is now. This is the big emphasis, and I feel so lucky to be at this place at this time with
Oh,
this
yeah,
interest. It just all lined up so perfect.
that's awesome. Well, before I let everyone go, our April Sol Speaker Series is going to be incorporated into our Starfleet Project Earth Day, which is going to be on Saturday, April 26th. It's our version of celebrating International Earth Day, and we're going to have Dr. David Alexander, who's a flight surgeon with NASA, as our speaker. I'm still waiting for confirmation, but he's already confirmed a couple times. I just want to make double sure before we put it out there in press. But we're going to have trivia. We're also going to be having an interesting presentation that I'm working on putting together about the history of environmental protection and conservation. And I'm trying to have a global focus here. So we've got a couple of irons in the fire. Well, that was a bad choice of words. There's a group, the World Wildlife Fund in Australia is doing a study using AI and something with their cameras to monitor the wildlife population's recovery after the big fires that they had. So I'm hoping we can get a speaker from them. At the very least, I can get permission to use their videos about that. And we have Owen Swart, who's an SFI member, is going to do a video on the cheetah rescue conservation program he works with. So it's going to be, we're going to have a lot of really interesting things. There'll be a morning session and an afternoon session. And that's from the perspective of standing here in Michigan. But they're going to be repeats. So half of it, I would say, or maybe a little more, is actually live presentation. And maybe a little less than half is video. And everything will be exactly the same so that we can accommodate more folks from around the world to join us. It's our first one. I'm hoping it's a success. Yes, thank you, Pam. I always credit Pam for getting me out of my Michigan-centric, US-centric point of view. But it's gonna be good, and I'm hoping we can get good participation and maybe make it an annual event. And I'm still working on setting up the next speakers with our liaisons. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And again, thank you so much, Sarah. And we'll get the video up on YouTube probably early in the week, next week. And I'll send you a link when we get that up, Sarah, so you can use it if you need to.
Okay, yeah, great, thank you. And
All
thank you
right.
for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, we'll say adieu to everyone and have a wonderful day and happy International Women's Day.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.